Alright, so video block 7. What are the hallmarks of quantitative research? And the last video blog kind of compared quantitative and qualitative, and I kind of was leaning more toward uh, qualitative. So at this time I'll take a different approach and I'll try and lean more toward quantitative. And for quantitative would be quantitative has a truth factor, a factor that in society, whether this be actually correct or not, in society, quantitative research tends to be the one where people would agree that it's harder to argue. Quantitative research can sometimes not be taken as seriously, and can say, oh, well, everyone was different, like, how can you have a consensus on that? You can't. But quantitative, if you got the numbers match what you're trying to say, then it's fact, right? So that's kind of how quantitative can help. And how I see it as helping in a lot of things is most scientific studies are going to need that quantitative. They're going to need that truthiness. They're going to need that to really, that's really going to kind of be a key in making sure that it's true, making sure that it's hard to argue, because numbers are, if the numbers match and then you can just do it again and again, if it's repeatable, then with those numbers, if the numbers are repeatable, it's really difficult to argue. And whereas qualitative is going to be really hard to repeat. A lot of your studies are, it's going to be harder to prove that it's repeatable. It's going to be harder to get the same answers every time if it's quantitative. If people if people have the opportunity to change their answer, they may. If people have the opportunity to change their feelings, they might. Whereas, if it's quantitative, it's going to show a lot less of that. It's going to show a lot less of changing. There's going to be a lot less things that can affect it. And I think that's what's important about quantitative, and that's what's helpful in really proving a point. And then, so how that can help us, that's really hard for me to say, because I've tried to say how this would help in my research, but you can always put things on a Likert scale. That seems like the easiest way to bring it in, but I don't really see what we're trying to measure as really being something that would be good for quantitative. Though I wish it would be, because of that truth factor, because of that factor that makes it harder to dispute. Certainly, I would like it to be a more quantitative research study, but it doesn't always work out that you have a quantitative research. You may have a quantitative research, and then there may be things where qualitative is just not effective either, and I think that's just going to be different. So but the math behind the quantitative, the fact that it is quantity, you always hear quantity over quality. So I think of that as like, people just tend to like numbers. If you give them, if you have one great masterpiece painting, in the short run, that's not going to be as good as having, painting hundreds of other paintings. If you're trying to paint for a living, your one masterpiece that takes you 10 years, and you could have painted 1,000 paintings in that time, and you would have done a lot better as far as making money goes, as far as feeding yourself. It's going to be a lot better to get that quantity, and that's kind of sometimes how quantitative is. People just want to see the numbers. Yeah, show me the numbers. And if you can't show them the numbers, they just don't think so. They don't believe it. Even if you do a fantastic qualitative study, it may not be taken the same, and that's just kind of how things can go sometimes. And so that's why quantitative is so effective. It's just effective in the fact that, it's really hard to argue, and it's just great to have that extra basis, and that's why mixed methods can be so good, because you got the qualitative that you really want. You want to see that. You want to see that qualitative research, because that can be a lot more fun. But then you have that quantitative to really back up what you're saying and really give you some teeth to your research, and that can be really effective.